We have come to the third University of Kerala, and the session is titled as China and Africa, Europe, Latin America, and the US. And the session will be chaired by Dr. Suresh Shah, Professor, Department of Political Science, University of Kerala. So I invite you, sir, to chair the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Nirupama, and all the panelists. And I'm good afternoon to all. And I'm so happy to chair this session because it is very important for important continents, and China's policy will be assessed by eminent scholars, starting with Professor M.S. John from Central University of Kerala. And in this session, I think that there are 7 resource person, and they will be presenting. And the rules of the game are the same, like in the morning, like 10 minutes for presentation. And if any time left, we will have Q&A towards the end. So without taking much of your time, I just request, because Professor M.S. Jones sir is also in a hurry to, he is having another meeting. So I request Professor M.S. Jones sir to present his paper. Over to you, sir, Professor M.S. Jones.
Thank you, Professor Suresh. Colleagues and my dear friends, well, I'm going to give you some insights into the China's entry into Africa and the logic behind it, the kind of criticisms that have emerged. Since we have a shortage of time, I'll just dwell on a few themes. First of all, if you look at the history of Chinese engagement, you'll see that in the 50s and so on, during the period of decolonization, China had actually created a good impression among the African nations with the Bandung Declaration and the Bandung Principles and all that. And also this phase actually goes all the way up to the 70s with the Goodwill kind of railway, passing all the way up to the Indian Ocean, from the heartland to the Indian Ocean. But when there was a split between the USSR and China, most of the African countries tended to be more on the side of the USSR. So there was a lull, and then we see after the modernization and the expansion of the economy in the 1990s, after the end of the Cold War, China comes to Africa in a very, very big way. And ever since then, we see that Africa has been one of the priority areas of China. Very often when new presidents and new foreign ministers take over, they first visit Africa before they go elsewhere, so as to emphasize not only to Africa, but also to the domestic population that Africa matters to us perhaps more than many other continents in terms of the kind of resources that we need to steer our economy, as well as achieve the so-called high levels of growth and emerge as a global power. So we witnessed, for example, in the year 2000, the investment in Africa was to the tune of 9.86 billion. And this actually jumped to something like 207 billion by the year 2018. So this is, several times you can see. And China had overtaken US as early as in 2009. So many people were really wondering at the speed of growth in FDI, Chinese FDI. And if you look around, you'll see that many African students who were earlier going to the West for higher education and so on, increasingly going to China for higher education. And you'll see a number of countries in Africa also registered good growth rate during this period. If you take the pre-COVID situation, as I said, Chinese entry was largely due to China's craving for more and more resources to, to stir the China's growth-led development. In addition to that, finding markets for the finished products. So in many ways, it had the same colonial kind of intentions, but then of course, in an altogether different context. There are issues relating to cultural incompatibility. A typical African would find it easier to relate to maybe a person from the West compared to someone from China because of very strong cultural incompatibilities. We also see a lot of exploitative practices. And there was also, if you look at the Chinese investment, there's a lack of commitment to develop local skills, local managerial styles, and also draw on local expertise. Now, this is one of the areas that that one can easily identify. But there are people who say that the Chinese, entry has certain benefits for Africans, in the sense that Africa, so far, they were dealing with the Americans and the West, the World Bank, the IMF, and all that, and they had seen their arrogance and their tendency to link aid with certain other conditionalities, like, say, for example, good governance issues, conducting of elections. So, in other words, there was a political side to aid, which was looked upon by many African leaders with, a lot of agitation. Whereas the Chinese aid is accompanied by absolutely no such conditionalities. They don't actually talk about the political situation or security situation or even governance-related matters. So that's one. So they found a kind of freshness when they started dealing with China. But then there's one tendency that we see: the larger concentrations of Chinese investments, they are actually typically found in. I hope you can hear me because the power has gone off. Okay. They are typically found in those countries where the regulatory framework, regulatory mechanisms, and institutions are quite weak. So, in other words, to be very frank, those countries which had weak institutions and which were known for their high levels of corruption, they were the very countries in which the Chinese found fertile ground for greater investment. So this also speaks about the nature of Chinese investment, in the sense that Chinese investment is not very transparent. So, for example, even official statistics relating to the quantum of FDI is also not very reliable, because China doesn't release such kind of official statistics. So this lack of transparency has been a major problem. And also whether this is going to benefit the African countries, this is also questionable. In countries like Zambia, the local traders and so on, they had registered protests when all these Chinese cheap goods were, flooded in their market and all that. There were also instances of local people attacking Chinese workers and Chinese business managers and all that. So on the one hand, there's an anxiety. On the other hand, they see it as an opportunity. Now, given the fact that
Hello, sir. Sir, you are not audible, sir. Hello. Hello. Hello, Professor John, sir. Hello. Hello.
There may be some connectivity issue. Let us wait for a few seconds.
Okay.
Okay, I think 1 or 2 minutes are left.
Yeah. Okay.
So you see that China how does China manage with many of these poor countries? Now, there are some countries which are able to negotiate better deals with China, like say South Africa and so on. But there are countries like maybe Congo which do not have that capacity. In some cases, China, tries to invest, and then in return for natural resources like oil, which is often known as the Angola model. It has become quite popular in China. I just want to end by saying that notwithstanding all these things, the COVID situation has created a kind of peculiar scenario. And then the West has realized that China is making inroads into Africa, and they have both come. I mean, the United States with the Build Back Better idea, and then the European Economic Community also have come up with an initiative, putting out a bait to the Africans. So I'm sure that these opportunities could be used by the Africans, to as a kind of bargaining chip with the Chinese. Now, in the post-corona situation, given the fact that most of these economies have contracted substantially, China also will have to rethink about many of its strategies. And I'm sure that in the years to come, given the fact that there's a lot of criticism, and there was also a big furore when China was about to, there was news about the Chinese takeover of the Entebbe airport because Uganda was not able to, pay the Chinese debt, and didn't have sufficient resources to do that. So, given this kind of situation, I believe that the Chinese are likely to change some of their strategies which would also benefit the African continent as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Jones, sir, for such a wonderful presentation. And you have given how the Chinese approach in Africa, the evolution of their policy, and also how China deals with many the countries in the African continent. And of course, it was China's opportunity by when the Soviet Union disintegrated, they have filled the vacuum in Africa. And I think that it is a very interesting paper. And now I invite Dr. Banerjee. She is a research fellow in Indian Council of World Affairs. Over to Banerjee.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you, Professor Kutty and Dr. Uma, for this opportunity. I apologize for the sound quality. I have a sore throat, so I am going to sound slightly off like this. So quickly going into my presentation, I'm looking at China's engagement with Latin America countries. And if you look at the trajectory of this engagement, you would find that the Latin American countries go through a cycle of development and underdevelopment, and economies going to periods of boom and then burst. So it was in one of these cycles that in the 2000s, beginning of this century, that Latin American countries welcomed Beijing's entry into the hemisphere. What further advanced this close relationship was the fact that around this period, you find Latin America had very close ideological, affinities with Beijing. So during this period, Beijing entered or established itself more and more in Latin America. And as the years have passed, it has become more prominent. You find it in all aspects, especially in the economic aspect in Latin America. However, in the past few years, as Beijing's economic activities have increased, and so has scrutiny of its economic activities, you find there is a very pragmatic and cautious thinking which has overcome in Latin America, both in its popular thinking and within its elite and political circles. There is a skepticism on the benefits of getting very close to Beijing. And there is concerns regarding China's political, environmental, labor, and commercial practices and their effects on certain constituencies within the region. And one finds that there is a certain amount of pushback from the people. The spate of protests that you have seen across Latin America in the past 7 to 8 years, a lot of them do have to do with economic ideas and how the economy is not doing well. and especially the fact that Chinese companies which are not investing in the people of Latin America. Rather, they're investing in companies and bringing their own expertise, which do not lead to any growth for Latin America per se. The other thing one has to keep in mind when looking at China's engagement in Latin America is Latin America's own relationship with the United States, which continues to be its largest security and economic partner, while it is trying to balance out with China, which is becoming its major economic and investment partner. Now, if you look at it, briefly giving you the US perspective, that US has woken up to the idea that there is a long-term threat from China, especially within its own region. And this is a bipartisan view, which is converging in the United States to build a more robust response to China's rise, both globally and regionally. And to address the issue regionally, the US has ramped up its campaigns to compete more directly with Beijing on several fronts, including in infrastructure within the hemisphere. However, as was pointed out by the previous speaker, COVID-19 has kind of seriously affected the entire world, the relations that countries have with each other. And though China is going through its own economic downturn, and this may have limited its options of how it would engage with other countries and other regions, one finds that the governments of the region, which are also facing desperate situations for capital and investment, are continuing to be open to dealing with Beijing on issues, especially as you find that Beijing has a very no strings attached, or they do not believe in interfering in the political spectrum when they are giving investments, which is an advantage because there are certain countries in Latin America which have questionable political leanings, or the governments have questionable political rise. Now, I will quickly just look at three areas which I think are very important to highlight when we look at China's engagement with the region. Now, if China's core in these areas would be the economic relations, it has long been seen that China is engaged with Latin America, and from 2000 its trade has increased from about 12 billion to about 315 million in 2019. So that's quite a jump in a span of about 19 years. It has now become the primary trade partner for Brazil, Chile, Uruguay, Paraguay, Argentina. And these are some of the major economies in Latin America. Chinese governments are giving governments in Latin America a considerable amount of loans. So in about 2005 to 6, they gave about $140 billion in loans to Latin America, whereas now it exceeds about $1 billion per year. And these loans are not just by the Chinese government, they also include Chinese banks, which have made commitments to the region. And together, these commitments are more than the commitments that the World Bank, the International American Development Bank combined have for that region. So you can see that the scale of Chinese investments in Latin America has grown exponentially over the past 20 years. And we find that as these investments have increased, Chinese companies have also shifted from just looking at service sectors and infrastructure to now going into other more critical areas such as electricity, internet, railway, port projects. And as I will speak in my next section, they have certain security consequences. Another thing you would find in terms of economic development and relations between Latin America and China is that a number of countries such as Ecuador, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile have joined or are supportive of the Belt and Road Initiative. They've also joined the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. And these are some of the reasons that China is also shifting more of its investments towards Latin America, because it finds that the region provides it with a huge amount of resources, especially when you look at resources which are for technology-driven, sector, which is where the world is heading to. That is going to be a major sector of for security, for economics, for your social work. And it is a sector in which China is competing with the United States. So it is finding that if it continues to invest in these kind of resources in Latin America, there are huge benefits for China. For Latin America, in turn, this investment means that a part of its developmental requirements are being able to be met, and it also allows it to move goods very efficiently within the region so that its intra-Latin American trade is also enhanced. Another aspect which is often overlooked or is not paid much attention to in the economic sector is that Latin America is closely becoming an important tourist hub for China. And one finds that as more and more Chinese tourists go to Latin America, a lot of these countries are tourism dependent economies. So as more tourists comes, they have less leverage to kind of, negotiate with China, because most of the Chinese tourists who come are high spending tourists. So they spend a lot of money. So the economies become dependent on this one sector, which becomes a major chunk of the GDP. The second sector one finds China investing a lot is in security cooperation. This is both hardcore military engagements as well as other areas. Looking at military engagement, it is a very important aspect of China's relations with Latin America, and something that it has officially acknowledged in its 2008, 2015, and 2016 white paper on defense, where it talked about how China will actively carry out military exchanges and cooperation with Latin American Caribbean countries and increase friendly exchanges between defense and military leaders of the two sides. So taking forward from that, we find that there are a number of joint military exercises, small scale, that have taken place between Chinese military as well as the militaries of the Latin America and Caribbean countries. China is now actively involved in search and rescue operations, or hard operations, which are humanitarian and disaster relief operations here. It is actively taking part in UN peacekeeping in Haiti, which is part of the region. Apart from this, there is the arms sales and other interaction with its Latin American partners. It is also involved in selling small armors, small weapons, small armored vehicles. It is involved in also sharing technology and resolving product performance and support issues, such that it shows to the countries here and to the military leadership that it is not just sale, that they are here for after sale services. And what this after sale service actually provides is building long-term relationships in the region and establishing their own base here. It needs to be pointed out that the military in Latin America and the Caribbean countries plays a very important role within the government's formation of foreign policy. So if China is able to establish good linkages within the military of a country, it is going to affect how that country's government looks at China through its foreign policy lenses. Chinese PLA Army, Navy, and Air Force is increasing its partnership with the countries through institutional exchanges and professional military education. It is also supporting them in intelligence gathering, sorry, and helping them in future operations in the region, such that they can operate in any environment and any theater. Apart from this hardcore
Dr.
military,
Banerjee, two more minutes.
Yeah, apart from this hardcore military, as I said, the port developments, the railways, etc., are infrastructure developments which are causing concerns, because China usually uses them for dual purposes. So while they're civilian in nature, they can also be used for military. And the third area one finds China engaging rapidly with Latin America is in the technology field, especially in telecommunication and in the development of 5G networks, which, as I said again, is a dual use thing. There is concern that data from various networks, various technologies would be passed on to the Chinese government, and it would enhance their reach into Latin America. The other aspect of technology is the growth and presence of Chinese e-commerce vehicles here. end goal that I find in my conclusion, I would point out for China, the end goal is to expand its global outreach, both economically, militarily, and politically. And in that, Latin America features very prominently. Another foreign policy goal is to move as many countries in Latin America from recognizing Taiwan. And to some extent, the last end goal for China here is to challenge the US in its own sphere of influence, as the US is challenging China in Asia and in the Indo-Pacific. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Banerjee, for such a very descriptive presentation on the trade and security defense interaction between China and Latin American countries. And now I request Dr. Anil Kumar. He is Assistant Professor and Head Government College, Chalakudy, Trichy. Over to you, Dr. Anil.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Sir, am I audible?
Yes,
audible?
Audible. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Respected chairperson of this session, Dr. Suresh sir, coordinator Dr. Josukutty sir, and senior professor John sir, Dr. Shruti, and other fellow panelists, and my dear students. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to present a paper on US perceptions on China's rise and its regional engagements in this seminar. And we are all know that the world's lone superpower United States relationship with a potential strategic competitor China in the post-Cold War period is very crucial due to their sharply contrasting worldviews, opposing political systems, and competing economic and geostrategic interests. The rise of China as the potential challenger to the United States-led Western dominance has signaled the return of great power competition in the international order. Some may call it as a new Cold War. But we can see that China, currently the second largest economy globally, is on a track to overtake US by maybe in 2030 to become the world's largest economy. It's also the world's biggest energy consumer and its second biggest defense spend. Emergence of, but very interesting fact is that the emergence of non-traditional security threats and sino-economic cooperation created different perceptions in United States to deal with China in the strategic affairs and the regional engagements. And my paper basically traces the factors which constitute the perceptions of United States towards China's rise, and also analyzes US response towards it. And I also made an attempt to find out the US response towards China's regional strategic policies and ambitions towards international political economy. So regarding the first part of my presentation, I'm trying to, I'm illuminating the factors which constitute the US perceptions towards China. So basically, if you are analyzing from history regarding Indo-China relations, you are concerned, the basic factor, one of the basic factor which determining the US perception towards China is, of course, the China's commitment towards open and liberal international capital economic order. This was an expectation from the part of United States when they have given recognition to China in 1979. We will evaluate that. But the second is, of course, the second factor is, of course, we can see that the American values and the United States goal is to protect its vital national interests, which are basically articulated even the 4 pillars of the 2017 National Security Strategy of United States of America, in which they are clearly declared, I quote, "We aim to, 1, to protect the American people, homeland, and the way of life. 2nd, to promote American prosperity. 3rd, to preserve peace through strength. And 4, advancing American influence." So, of course, this is to protect their national interest and American values. So, the expectation about China's interference in China's dealings in the international economic order and the national interest of United States and American values, which plays a very important role in determining the perceptions of US towards China. And the third factor is basically how America is interested in preserving the status quo, how far they are strong in that aspect, or the status quo aspect that itself is a very important factor which is culminating the US perception towards United States. And of course, history also plays a significant role in creating different kinds of perceptions in the United States. Okay, then we are taking different perceptions of United States from history to the current context from three major angles: from the angle of economy, and from the angle of security, and from the angle of American values. Historically, we can see that when United States and People's Republic of China established diplomatic relations in 1979, United States policy toward PRC was largely premised on a hope that deepening engagement would stimulate fundamental economic and political opening in the PRC and lead to its emergence as a constructive and a responsible global stakeholder with a more open society. More than 40 years later, it has become evident that this approach underestimated the will of the Chinese Communist Party to constrain the scope of economic and political reform in China. Over the past 2 decades, reforms have slowed, stalled, or reversed, and the PRC's rapid economic development and increased engagement with the world did not lead to the convergence with the citizen-centric, free and open order as the United States had hoped. And the CCP has chosen instead to exploit the free and open rules-based order and attempt to reshape the international system in its favor. Beijing openly acknowledges that it seeks to transform the international order to align with the CCP's interests and ideology. The CCP's expanding use of economic, political, and military power to compel acquiescence from nation states harms vital American interests and undermines the sovereignty and the dignity of the countries and individuals around the world. To respond to Beijing's challenge, the US administration has adopted a competitive approach to the PRC based on eye-based assessment of CCP's intentions and actions, a reappraisal of the United States' many strategic advantages and shortfalls, and the tolerance of greater bilateral friction. US approach is not premised on determining a particular end state for China. Rather, US goal is to protect United States' vital national interests as articulated in the 4 pillars of the 2017 National Security Strategy of United States of America. US competitive approach to the PRC have 2 major objectives. First, to improve the resiliency of the institutions, alliances, and partnerships to prevail against the challenges the PRC presents. And second, to compel Beijing to cease or to reduce actions harmful to the United States' vital national interests and those of US allies and partners. Even as US compete with PRC, US welcome cooperation where their interests align. The United States expects to engage in fair competition with PRC, whereby both of their nations, business and individuals, can enjoy security and prosperity. So they are thinking in such a line because they realize the fact that in the international trade, how much their economy is integrated with the US, global economy, and what is the position of China in that economy. Prevailing in strategic competition with the US, PRC requires cooperative engagement with the multiple stakeholders, and administration is committed to building partnerships to protect US shared interests and values. Vital partners of this administration include Congress, state and local governments, the private sector, civil society, and academia. The Congress has been speaking out through hearings, statements, and reports that shed light on CCP's malign behavior. The Congress also provides legal authorities and resources for the United States government to take actions to achieve strategic objectives. The administration also recognizes the steps allies and partners have taken to develop more clear-eyed and robust approaches toward PRC, including European Union's publication March 2019 of European Union-China Strategic Outlook, among others. So United States is also building cooperative partnerships and developing positive alternatives with the foreign allies, partners, and international organizations to support the shared principles of free and open order. Specific to the Indo-Pacific region, many of these initiatives are described in documents such as the Department of Defense June 2019 Indo-Pacific Strategy Report and the Department of State November 19 report on a free and open Indo-Pacific, advancing a shared vision. Then the United States is working in a concert with mutually aligned visions and approaches such as Association of Southeast Asian Nations, Outlook on the Indo-Pacific, Japan's free and open Indo-Pacific vision, India's security and growth for all in the region policy, Australia's Indo-Pacific concept, and the Republic of Korea's new Southern policy, and Taiwan's new southbound policy. So we can see that in all these policies, United States trying to building a cooperative partnership with the developing positive alternatives to counter to protect American interest and advancing its values and interests. So, of course, when we are analyzing the three aspects, especially in the economic, situation, security challenges, and regional challenges. When we are taking the economic challenges, Beijing's poor record of economic reform commitments and its extensive use of state-driven protectionist policies and their practices harm United States companies and workers, distort global markets, violate international norms, and pollute the environment. When the PRC accorded to the World Trade Organization in 2001, Beijing agreed to embrace the WTO's open market-oriented approach and embed these principles in its trading system and institutions. WTO members expected China to continue on the path of economic reform and transform itself into a market-oriented economy and trade regime. These hopes were not realized. Beijing did not internalize the norms and practices of the competition.
Dr.
Yes,
Anil,
sir. Yes, sir.
Please conclude in 2 minutes.
Okay. So in the economic matters, we can see that it is totally, China is trying to make use of all the situations to protect its interests, because we know that there were many trade disputes between United States and China in the matters of trade, in the matters of intellectual property rights, in many issues. Even in the matter of One Belt, One Road initiative, Beijing umbrella attempts to describe the variety of initiatives in which we can see that they are not adhering the international norms. Instead, they are trying to expanding the use of Chinese industrial standards in many key technology sectors, and we can see that an effort to strengthen its own company's position in the global marketplace at the expense of non-Chinese firms. And regarding values, we can see that the CCP promotes, Chinese Communist Party promotes globally a value position that challenges the bedrock of American belief that America always believes in the inalienable right of human beings and right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Or we can say that they are more giving individual freedoms. But we can see that what is happening in China is that they are not transparent in this matter, and many of the rights of the people were not protected in the state, and they have a very very conflicting views with the United States in this matter. Then regarding security, we can see that I mentioned that whatever the policy of United States in Asia Pivot policy, or their Quad initiative, or their effort with Japan in the free and open Indo-Pacific region, free and open Indo-Pacific region, and their effort for free and open trade with many of these Australia, Japan, India, or Brazil, and all these initiatives they are taking, we can see that these are all responses from their part to a realist perspective that China is always interested to advancing through different ways. And we can see that during the time of this pandemic, certain studies were conducted by Pew Research Center, and this Pew Research Center survey is basically reflecting, and this is a important center which is conducting studies about people's opinion regarding different issues and nations at international level. And Pew Research Center's report provide that a negative perception of China among Americans hit a record high in 2020, with 73% of the respondents citing unfavorable views of country in a survey conducted by this research center. And various polls in pinpoint in 2008, which marked the definitive start of US-China trade war, and as a turning point when views of China began to decline among average Americans. No, we can see that in the survey conducted by Chicago Council on Global. Yes, within 1 minute I will conclude. So in the Chicago survey conducted by Chicago Council on Global Affairs, and survey conducted by Popular American Institute, then and many other institutes in Chicago Council, studies and Pew Research studies, all these research studies are showing that nowadays the popular perceptions about the United States are also having the same of American elites, that they believe that China should be contained properly. China should be deal very consciously, because there is a systemic pressure always on United States nowadays, because the American business companies, American trade, elites, they are all compelling United States to take a different position. So now China is in a state of there were different opinions are coming in China how to deal with the in United States to how to deal with China, because some are arguing that for economic benefit they should cooperate or they should engage with China, but others are arguing that definitely China should be contained. But now, after this pandemic, a serious negative opinion were erupted in United States, and which is basically supporting, the official line of the United States, which is, very visible in their all documents, and they are telling that China should be engaged properly with the strategic visions, and they should be contained very consciously. They should develop different kinds of alliances in different parts of the world to especially they should cooperate with the multilateral institutions, different regional alignments to counter China in the near future. So it is very sure that there is no possibility of any kind of cooperative engagement in the near future rather than conflict and strategic competition. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Anil Kumar, for making a very descriptive analysis of US-China interactions. Especially, you have highlighted the clashes of interest, especially in the Indo-Pacific region. And now I request Dr. Anand. He is assistant professor in the Department of Geopolitics and International Relations, Manipal University, and he is also a visiting faculty of our department. And I invite Dr. Anand. Over to you, Anand. Hello, Anand. Hello. Hello, Anand.
Thank you, Dr. Yeah. Suresh.
Please.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Am I audible?
Please. Yes. Audible.
Hello. So first of all, big thanks to Dr. Josukutty for inviting me to this international conference on a very, very pertinent theme, and also to Dr. Suresh for chairing this session. So today I will be speaking about China and Europe. I'll be looking at the emerging geopolitical trends related to China and Europe, and looking at it from the perspective of geopolitical theory, just to bring in a theoretical approach also. Because the time is really short, I would just try to keep it into just 10 propositions which I want to make here. First of all, let me put a disclaimer here for clarification here. When I talk about Europe, I am referring to here about the Europe which is without the post-Soviet space, or that is minus the post-Soviet space, as well as the Anglosphere or the UK. So that is the Europe which I am referring to here, the so-called mainland, more or less Western Central Europe put together. Because I know that other sections are being dealt with in other sessions. So to start with, my first proposition is that China's relations with Europe, it has a very deep historical and civilizational roots. Europe. And today also the so-called New Silk Road, it starts from China and it almost ends in Europe. It is taking 3 distinct pathways. One is the continental pathway, which is filled with roads and railways and energy corridors and whatnot. And then there is the maritime corridor. And then thirdly, we are also witnessing a new corridor which is coming up, which is the polar corridor, or which is known as the Polar Silk Road. So we see some kind of reverberations from the past, and this is in fact is related to the geographic imperatives which have been built into the whole framework here. Secondly, intended by its reform and opening up, and then intensified further by the formation and expansion of the EU. These are the phases in which China has built its presence and influence in Europe. Because prior to that, China's influence in Europe was, in the Europe which I am covering, was primarily very minimal. It had a few embassies through which it had its interlocutors in the West, as well as some contact with the eastern part of Europe. But further, with the opening up of China, the opportunities for trade, commerce, and investment expanded. And as China joined the WTO and became the factory of the world, Europe became one of its primary markets, a very prestigious market. And with the EU uniting together the Western, Central, and Eastern components together, the market size itself became extremely huge. And this is something which China has always been looking after. And as a result, China considers it as a high priority economic market to invest in. The third proposition which I would like to raise here is that China is playing a divide and rule game with the West, using the rhetoric of multipolarity, strategic autonomy, globalization, and climate action. In the sense that it is trying to woo Europeans away from America by saying that we need to construct a multipolar world on which these two players are in together. They want to construct, they want to make sure that Europe has options open. It has strategic autonomy, thinking which is different from the United States, what it commands. Something which has happened very more recently is the spirit of globalization, which EU especially has very openly been proposing. And with China of late, if you remember 2017, when Xi Jinping went to the Davos World Economic Forum, he was hailed as the savior of globalization, because it was a time when Trump came to power, Brexit happened, and there was all the talk of the Anglo-American world basically departing from globalization or rolling back globalization. So China and EU forged a partnership at that point of time to save globalization. And of course, a related thing is climate action, because for some time the United States have been out of that, and now they are coming back. But before that, just before that, the EU and China were in together to some extent. So using these various differences or in the Western camp, the divides in the Western camp, China is trying to move Europe away from the larger Western bloc, separating it from the United States. Now, a fourth proposition is that China is playing a similar game within Europe, not just in the West, but even within Europe, trying to exploit the opportunity provided by the divisions within Europe, which are very recently created since the global financial crisis, the Eurozone crisis, followed by the European refugee crisis, and ultimately ending up in Brexit. So in the time period from 2008 to 2020, we have seen that Europe, because until then Europe was at the consolidation phase, because all the satellite states of the Soviet Union also became part of the European Union by mid-2000s. But after that, we see now divides started coming up between North and South of Europe, and between the West and East of Europe, largely on economic aspects. The next proposition I would like to put up is, before that, I would like to say here that one of the three major focus areas in creating this divide is basically by Beijing focusing on the Central and Eastern Europe through what is called as the 16+1 format, because China is now engaged in the past 10 years in what is known as the 16+1 format, wherein the countries of Central and Eastern Europe and China are working together on a lot of cooperative projects, including the Belt and Road. And similarly, China is working bilaterally with a number of southern European countries, including Greece, which is now part of the 16+1, and later on Italy. In fact, Italy last year became, or the year before, became the only G7 country to become part of the Belt and Road Initiative. Now Arctic is also becoming important because Denmark has Greenland, and Greenland is something which China has been eyeing on. The fifth proposition which I would like to talk about is that China-Europe relations is much more nuanced subset of China's relations with the West in general. Democracy, freedom of press, and things like that. And we know that China is the exact antithesis of Europe in that respect. But still, even with that very basic contradiction of values itself, there is that of the United States and the West, which is basically now turning into a new kind of a Cold War, as many have mentioned before. A related point is that there are numerous examples to show this. For instance, China becoming the #1 trading partner of EU, the entry of a lot of European countries into BRI and AIIB. In fact, the biggest economies of Europe are all now members of the Asian Investment Infrastructure Investment Bank. And they have joined this bank despite the pressure from the United States not to join. Also, very lately, when all the talk of this new Cold War was going on, China had a deal with Europe, what is known as Comprehensive Agreement on Investment, which is an investment pact between these two entities. Now, this is happening just in the middle of all this rivalry. That's why I say that it is much more nuanced than the rest of China's relationship with the West in general, and it is much more diluted in Europe is much more diluted in its opposition towards China. The next proposition is that Europe is at the same time much more cautious in cooperating with China, unlike the countries in the post-Soviet space, whether it is Russia, Belarus, or Ukraine. Another point which I would like to emphasize here is that Europe's contradictions in its Russia policy, because with Russia, we have seen that now the Nord Stream 2 has come up. But this is happening, this collaboration between Russia and Germany is happening at the same time when Europe is confronting Russia in Ukraine and Belarus. And at the same time, it is having Europe is having a complex relations with Anglo-Saxons, because we know that Brexit was a major issue which came between Anglo and Europe. NATO, that is the US, especially under Trump, asking Europe to pay more for sustaining NATO. And lastly, one of the, if you can say, the last name of the coffin being the AUKUS, where Europe was again excluded in the Indo-Pacific military architecture. These all play a part in their attitude towards China's rise both in the globe as well as in Europe. My second last point is that China is increasingly facing a pushback on its ambitions in Europe. With the EU's recognition of China as a systemic rival, which they said in their 2019 document. They called them specifically as Europe called, EU called China as a systemic rival, with differences in value system, political systems, and come up with its own Indo-Pacific strategy, much to the disdain of China. And there is also an increasing criticism on China related to its internal affairs, whether it is Xinjiang or Hong Kong, or it's in this COVID era, the push to diversify supply chains away from China. Europe is also playing a part here because Europe has invested a lot in China. Its businesses have played a very important role in China. Now they want to also diversify their sources. But one thing which I want to bring to your notice here is that even though such a pushback is there, slowly, gradually it is building up, it doesn't mean that there is a cohesiveness within Europe. The cohesiveness as of now is bare minimum. The differences is still there, and China is trying to exploit this difference. Now, I have mentioned to you before that role of Central and Eastern Europe. It is not a surprise that this region is becoming a very important part of.
Dr. Anand, please conclude in 1 minute.
The China-EU geopolitical dynamics, because it has been like this forever. In fact, yes. So in fact, 100 years back, when the classical geopolitical theorists were thinking about creating a global framework for geopolitical theory, theorists like Alfred Mackinder, he said that, land power is the most important thing. And if you control the central part of Eurasia, you will control the rest of the world. But in order to control the central part of Eurasia, you need to control Eastern Europe. And which is this Eastern Europe? The Eastern Europe, which Mackinder was referring to, was the part of Europe which was the only outlet to the sea for the Eurasian heartland. And this was stretching from the Baltic to the Black Sea. And this is exactly the area where today China is utilizing its 16+1 diplomacy. And Europe is watching at it with a huge amount of worry. And it has already mentioned this as a huge headache. Because a lot of these countries, including Hungary is very close to Russia, Hungary is very close to China, and it is openly, even within by standing within EU, it is confronting the EU rules and norms. And increasingly that is becoming the case with Poland also. And there is a huge Chinese influence growing in these countries. In fact, the latest entry to this, which is Greece, which is we know already is fed up with the German largesse after the Eurozone crisis. They have, just like Hambantota in Sri Lanka, they have given over a port to China, the Piraeus port, which China is using as the gateway for entry into Europe. Yes. So in this way, we can basically utilize geopolitical theory also to bring in and explain how China is playing its game in Europe and raising its profile in this part of the world. So with that, I think I'll just end my 10th set of propositions here. Thank you all for your patient listening.
Thank you, Dr. Anand, for making such a very narrative, theoretical orientation to China's interaction in Europe. And thank you very much. And now I invite Jitin Matthew, who is a senior research fellow in the Central University of Kerala. Over to you, Jitin. Hello,
thank
Jitin.
you, sir.
Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Am I audible?
You are audible, yes.
Respected Chair Professor Suresh R, Professor M.S. John, and fellow panelists and dear learners, a warm good afternoon to all of you. So first of all, I would like to thank the Department of Political Science, Kerala University, and also Dr. Josukutty, CA, for this opportunity. So let me share my screen. Is it visible?
Yes, visible. Yes.
Okay, so today I'm presenting a paper titled Chinese Engagement in the Horn of Africa, a Gateway to African Endeavors. And the Horn of Africa region is considered as one of the most strategically significant regions of the world. And the countries that form the Horn are Ethiopia, Eritrea, Djibouti, and Somalia. And this region is located on the east of the African continent. And this region's close proximity to the Indian Ocean, Red Sea, and Gulf of Aden makes it more important for external powers due to its strategic location. And this region is accessible at multiple seas. And also, this region is notorious for war crimes, wars, civil wars, ethnic strife, poverty, piracy, and terrorism. Currently, there is ethnic conflict that is happening in Ethiopia between Tigray ethnic group and the Ethiopian government. So coming to China's economic rise has dramatically increased the importance for global commerce through Bab el-Mandeb Strait. That is the strait that connects Red Sea with the Gulf of Aden. And the significance of this route has been further magnified by China's Belt and Road Initiative. And this region is a crucial part of China's 21st century maritime Silk Road, which is a part of BRI project. And around 10% of the world's cargo passes through this region, through the waters of this important seas. And most of the oil containers are also passes through this region. And China's African endeavors had a significant leap through the operations from the Horn of Africa. Moving on, this is the map of the Horn of Africa region. And you can find the countries of Ethiopia, Eritrea, Djibouti, and Somalia. And you can also see the Greater Horn, which consists of Sudan, South Sudan, Uganda, and Kenya. And above the Horn of Africa, you can see the Arabian Peninsula and the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, and also the Gulf of Aden. And Djibouti, in Djibouti, as you might have heard, a large number of foreign military bases are there. And China opened its first overseas military base in Djibouti in 2017 August. And China was not the first country to open a military base in Djibouti. The countries like USA, France, Italy, and Japan already had a military base in Djibouti. And why a military base matters? Why a military base in Djibouti matters? So there are quite a number of operations that China wanted to do from this military base. Even though it's a military base, China doesn't want to call this as a military base. They are saying that it is just a support base. And so it was established to provide military logistics to counter piracy missions, and also support Chinese peacekeeping forces in the region, and also to facilitate the evacuation procedure of Chinese nationals from crisis situations like that happened in Yemen and Libya, and also Somalia and Sudan. And they wanted to use this port for other humanitarian operations. And the Chinese Navy ships patrolling the sea waters will also get maintenance and also refilling of fuel from this base. And Chinese military presence in the Indian Ocean region will also get assistance and logistical support from the base. And the 21st century maritime Silk Road project is also will receive much benefits from this military base. And China wanted to combat the terror threat from terrorist outfits like Houthi rebels in Yemen and also Al-Shabaab in Somalia. And the base establishment has taken a place at the same time as China was seeking to advance its commercial interest in Djibouti's Dorale container terminal, which is a crucial part of Djibouti's energy needs. And together with many other projects, China's engagement in Djibouti rests on a mixing of commercial and military interests. And moving on to the anti-piracy missions. So China's objective to present itself as a responsible world leader is another reason why China wanted to do a lot of security activities in this part. So China is using its counter-piracy and peacekeeping mission to cast itself as a responsible global power. So China is not not only the country that deploys Navy in this water to counter anti-piracy. Even India, Japan, South Korea, and Australia and other European countries are also participating in anti-piracy missions. But China single-handedly operates from this mission, apart from the joint task force of other countries. So China claims that they have rescued around 60 foreign ships from piracy attacks. So we know that the piracy has reduced since 2008-10, but still China is patrolling in these waters. Moving on, connecting Addis Ababa and Djibouti. Addis Ababa is the capital of Ethiopia, the second most populous country in the African continent. And Addis Ababa, the headquarters of African Union situates. And China is building a logistical infrastructure necessary for Ethiopia to succeed as the manufacturing hub. So being a landlocked country, Ethiopia's trade runs through Djibouti. So Ethiopia does not have access to the sea. So Ethiopia's trade runs through Djibouti. And these two countries were connected with a poor road network, which takes a lot of time to make a single trip. So China has built Addis Ababa Djibouti railway, which can cut the time limit between two cities down to 10 hours. And also Djibouti and Ethiopia are primary focal points of Chinese engagement in the Horn. In both the cases, Chinese economic activities are concentrated in four major sectors that are roads, railway, energy, and communication. And with Ethiopia, China has a political dream as well. Unlike other African countries, Western African countries or Southern African countries, Ethiopia is not a resource-rich country. And now China is not looking for resources, rather it is looking for political connection in Ethiopia. So Addis Ababa is increasingly becoming an intercontinental diplomatic hub hosting African Union. African Union's headquarters was built by China. Again, this $200 million project was inaugurated in 2000.
Jitin, please conclude in 2 minutes.
Okay. So this was constructed by China in 2012. And also UN Economic Commission for Africa is also headquartered in Addis Ababa. So Chinese and Ethiopian interests in the Horn of Africa have led to a close partnership that includes military cooperation. And moving on, China is also interested in Ethiopia because of influence in the Republic of Sudan and Egypt due to its control of the Blue Nile River. And China is trying to help Ethiopia in constructing dams across Blue Nile River. And trying to connect some dots, in Sudan, China has constructed a railway port from Sudan to N'Djamena, that's the capital city of Chad. And also it is constructing a presidential palace and a railway from Khartoum, that is the capital of Sudan, to Port Sudan. And in Somalia, China has trying to build a port in ancient town of Ale. And in Tanzania, again, China is trying to build a port in the city of Bagamoyo, that is near to Dar es Salaam. And in conclusion, the Chinese government wants to be the most influential power in the region, as it had identified this region as the gateway to the continent of Africa. So the major infrastructure projects initiated by China in the region can act as a catalyst for its great power ambitions in the whole Africa. And also China has elevated itself as a major player in the UN and also African Union peace operations in the last decade. So its involvement in the continent has expanded beyond the region with a large number of ongoing projects and a steady increase in presence in new countries. And the famous political economist, Ghanaian political economist George Ayittey has coined the phrase African solutions to African problems. And China has come up to help Africa, and China was saying that China will definitely help Africa to find solutions for African problems. And also China has initiated at least one project in almost 53 countries, except Eswatini. China has initiated projects in almost all countries of Africa. So in future, China wants to secure
Jitin,
support
Jitin,
from,
please.
I'm concluding. Yeah, support from these countries when it comes to international platforms like UN General Assembly. So these are my thoughts, and thank you for your patient listening. Thank you. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you, Jitin, for making a very interesting presentation on Chinese strategy in the Horn of Africa, a very strategically significant region. And now I invite Mohita Mohan. She is a PhD research scholar of our department. I request Mohita Mohan. Over to you, Mohita.
Thank you, sir.
Mohita, please start your
Okay, sir.
presentation.
Okay. Hello. Respected chair and my dear friends, today I am going to present on the topic China in Britain, the exclusive strategic partnership. China is playing an essential role in world politics. The engagement between the UK and China has become more extensive and intensive. Britain and China are cooperating within the circle of a diplomatic channel. In the middle of the 20th century, the UK was a superpower globally. In the last few decades, China became on the path of rapid economic rise. China's top foreign policy program, the Belt and Road Initiative, has also become one of the world's most active development projects. For the UK, BRI influenced domestically and internationally. The priority of China is only focusing on economic and material benefits from the UK. Brexit and the COVID-19 pandemic has formulated a new barrier for the relation with both powers. My presentation divided into three. First one is UK-China relations and historical overview. China in Britain, the bilateral relationship, and the last one is UK's response towards China's strategy, the constraints. UK-China relations and historical overview. In Sino-British cooperation, the United Kingdom was the first Western country to establish diplomatic relations with China. After the Korean War, Sino-British relations strengthened in 1970s and the 1980s. British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher visited China twice in 1982 and 1984. Tony Blair became new British leader from 1997 to 2007. He was very positive towards the relationship between China and Britain. In 2017 to 2010, the period of Gordon Brown continues on the path of Blair's period. The UK and China initiated their official relation based on economic and financial dialogue. The Conservative leader David Cameron became the new British Prime Minister in 2010. The period of Prime Minister David Cameron was also same as that of Tony Blair. That period represents a golden age. The relationship developed very smoothly and Britain became the best friend of China. From 2016 to 2019 is the period of Theresa May. Two countries maintained bilateral relationship, but the political problem was still considered as a matter. May's period was also considered the repetition of Cameron's period, especially in cultural and economic domination. Then a departure occurred between the bilateral relations due to Trump effect. The relationship between Britain and China is still unclear from 2019 because from 2019 onwards, Boris Johnson became the Prime Minister. He is significantly closer to the US than China. China could not attain a beneficial cooperation level with Britain in the period of Johnson's leadership compared to the era of Cameron. The primary reason is now Britain is more cooperative with the US. The historical political theme of British conservatives were against communist regime both in terms of ideology and also traditional political views. China in Britain, the bilateral relationship. The economic relationship between China and the United Kingdom is more than just about commerce. Nuclear cooperation occurred in that time. The Chinese President Xi Jinping and British Prime Minister David Cameron contracted a civil atomic pact in October 2015 at Hinkley Point. Hong Kong considered as a corner part of Sino-British relations. The major bilateral relationship to achieve market economy status. Second one is access to British technology. Third one is Hong Kong's handover to China. Fourth one is internationalization of renminbi, Belt and Road Initiative, and nuclear power station in Hinkley Point. To achieve market economy status, in this, economic collaboration and coordination are at the heart of British-Chinese relationship. Access to British technology. According to Center for China Globalization Analysis Team, the priority of China's engagement strategy needs to increase competitiveness through the acquisition of global management and high technological assets. Hong Kong's handover to China. Hong Kong considered as a corner part of Sino-British relations. Hong Kong has been a British colony for almost 150 years from 1841 to 1997. The internationalization of renminbi. China's currency, the renminbi or RMB, is ultimately internationalized. It gains an alternative store of international monetary value to the dollar and euro. Belt and Road Initiative. BRI is one of the other matter in their relation. This project is very essential for China's long-term objectives and global trade growth in 21st century. The last one, nuclear power station in Hinkley Point. Nuclear cooperation occurred with the Chinese President Xi Jinping and British Prime Minister David Cameron contracted a civil atomic pact in October 2015 at the Hinkley Point. UK's response towards China's strategy, the constraints. The main constraints are...
Mohita, please conclude in 1 minute.
Okay, sir. US effect on China-Britain relations, Hong Kong issue, Agar's problem, Hawaii scandal, COVID-19 pandemic, reaction against the Belt and Road Initiative, constraints from EU, from British Prime Minister Boris Johnson after Brexit. The mainly US effect, these are the points. The main factor that affected the smooth functioning of Sino-British bilateral relationship was the influence of US. Then the AUKUS Pact also showed the position of Britain in international relations that makes Britain give more importance to US than China. The Hong Kong issue, the strain that was a strain in Sino-British bilateral relationship was the influence of US and some political disagreements and disputes. The British government has decided to grant citizenship rights and Hong Kong citizens due to this new security law and related practices. Then the Uyghurs problem, the Uyghurs are Turkey Muslim minority living in Xinjiang. The British media institutions, the BBC, has frequently reported the human rights violations issues. To reciprocate this, China cancelled the broadcasting rights of BBC in China. The Hawaii scandal issue, Britain removed the Chinese technology giant Hawaii from its 5G network. That also Western hesitation over Hawaii is related to the company's relation with the Chinese state. The COVID-19 pandemic, Britain signed a free trade deal with China. Other crucial choice London will be making in British-Chinese relations. The COVID-19 pandemic also negatively affect the China and Britain's relationship. The reaction against Belt and Road Initiative, the Britain made clear that they give more importance to US.
Mohita, please conclude.
Then the conclusion part, the recent historical progress of Sino-British relations, history shows that the cooperation has gone through the path of conflict. The UK and China both are emerging powers at the global level. It will define the ground of separation of powers. The relation between China and UK is a story of many checks but no balances. The UK-China strategic relationship has long and complex history in periods of both cooperation and confrontation. Then both UK and China have been focusing only on their commercial interest while developing a reciprocal relationship that much better for China. Britain tries to depart from China's strategic circle. It is happening due to the influence of the US-UK partnership from the period of Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mohita, for bringing all the issues which are at the bilateral domain of China-British Britain relations. And now I request the last presentation, Deepak Krishna Kumar. He is our MA student, MA in International Relations and Diplomacy student. Over to you, Deepak Krishna Kumar.
Yes, thank you, sir. Sir, is the slide visible, sir?
Yeah, it is visible. Yes.
Yeah, yes. So good afternoon to all, respected Suresh sir, Josukutty sir, and all other esteemed dignitaries assembled here. My name is Deepak Krishna Kumar, and I am presenting the paper, The Emergence of New Cold War, US versus China. So China has emerged as a potential superpower at the global front after the end of Cold War. Now the world is witnessing the emergence of a new Cold War owing to the rise of China as the second economic power of the world, posing threat to the US interest. The existing hegemonic state, the United States of America, perceives that China is posing an open challenge to its dominance and national interest around the world. China, led by President Xi Jinping, has been dreaming of building a parallel universe which will be under its supremacy and domination. Owing to its high economic and military strength, mounting confidence, and unconquerable spirit in world affairs. So with this intention, Mr. Jinping has initiated an alternate trading system, BRI, a multilateral banking system, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, digital payment platform WeChat, Alipay, world-class digital network, Huawei 5G, and a modern military force. So in this light, its drive towards swift military modernization, technological progress, and the ability to put in place interconnectivity strategies such as Belt and Road Initiative made China a noticeable threat to the American global supremacy. Thomas J. Christensen of Columbia University discounts the prevailing tensions between China and the US as the new Cold War. So now coming to the objectives. So why China is perceived as a threat is the first objective, then emergence of new Cold War, whether the Indo-Pacific is a theater of real conflict, global impact of new Cold War and threat of cyber warfare, and possible ways of rapprochement. So why China is perceived as a threat? So China's nominal GDP, US dollar 14.34 trillion, and GDP purchasing power parity, US dollar 27.31 trillion, make her world's second largest economy after the USA. China contributes 12% of the United Nations budget share, which is more than Japan, making her second largest contributor. Moreover, significantly, China has been heading 4 of the 15 UN specialized agencies that include Food and Agriculture Organization, the International Telecommunication Union, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and the International Civil Aviation Organization. So, Nikki Haley, the US representative to the United Nations from 2017 through 2018, said that China grew economically without democratizing. Instead, its government became more ideological and repressive, with military ambitions that are not just regional and defensive, but global and designed to intimidate. And as the distinction between civilian and military technology gradually eroded across the globe, Chinese President Xi Jinping made it official policy for Chinese companies to put all technology at the disposal of China's military. So, emergence of new Cold War. So, according to renowned scholar Yuan Peng of the China Institute of International Relations, the structure of the US-China bilateral relations will evolve as from a superpower versus major power to a technological giant versus economic giant. Moreover, the military tensions between two are rising in the Indo-Pacific region. The outbreak of world economic crisis of 2008 compelled the US to change its outlook and acknowledge China as an economic giant and not just as an ordinary major power. Given the increasingly hostile perception towards each other, UN has also warned of the inevitability of new Cold War between China and the United States. In the economic sphere, sanctions and counter-sanctions are becoming a norm. The trade war was instigated by the Trump administration to weaken America's competitors and especially to contain China economically. According to Timothy Garton-Ash, the primary cause of this new Cold War is the turn taken by the Chinese Communist Party leadership under Xi Jinping since 2012, more oppressive at home and more aggressive abroad. So China currently spends more on research and development than the US, and in some areas such as artificial intelligence, China seems to be ahead of US. The mass diplomacy, the BRI reflect methods adopted by the Chinese regime to undermine US hegemony. Further, Indo-Pacific is a theater of real conflict. So geopolitical significance of Indo-Pacific region has grown as a result of the major powers' extensive reliance on sea routes for transportation of energy resources and commercial goods. For instance, the South China Sea has not only emerged as one of the world's busiest commercial waterways, but has become one of the most controversial geopolitical hotspots. To manage the Chinese threat, Washington's free and open Indo-Pacific strategy
Krishna Kumar, please unmute your mic. Krishna Kumar, please.
So how are America's allies and partners in the region?
Krishna Kumar, please. Yeah. Please unmute your mic.
Yes, sir, I have unmuted, sir. Sir, moreover, these countries have stake. Yes, sir.
Continue, please.
Yes. So, moreover, these countries have stakes in bilateral trade with China, and it would be difficult to forego these gains and heed the United States' intermittent calls for enhancing security ties to counter Chinese influence. In the Indo-Pacific, many states, including the members of ASEAN, look to China as their most important economic partner, whereas US is seen as a key strategic partner. Meanwhile, Beijing has strengthened its presence in South China Sea through building artificial islands and positioning paramilitary force that could threaten the energy security of US allies and partners. The country has strengthened its presence in Indian Ocean by building and leasing Hambantota port in Sri Lanka and constructing major port facilities at Gwadar in Pakistan. It is also engaged in captive deepwater terminal project in Myanmar. However, faced with an untrammeled rise of China, the United States benefit from the presence of a robust power, India, which probably seems willing to and capable of independently helping in balancing China's mounting influence in Asia. Hence, India remains the best option for US to redefine its strategic approach in the Indo-Pacific region through significantly loosening its restraints on military technology transfer to India, allowing for a marked increase of India-US military-to-military cooperation and assisting India in building maritime capabilities in Indian Ocean. Now, global impact of new Cold War and cyber warfare. Trump's protectionist proclivity for geoeconomic warfare proved damaging to the US credibility and ability to regulate the international political and economic order. As a result, both China and Russia in tandem seem to be determined to counter the US power, particularly in Asia. Global and regional security issues are on the rise due to the emergence of symptomatic new Cold War. As a result of it, the international arms control and disarmament efforts have also suffered setbacks. And with an acceleration in the arms race, the non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction remains problematic. The international non-proliferation regime is compromised by pragmatism and double standards, and hence it faces new challenges. The US is bringing in technological and institutional modernization in pursuit of outright military dominance. Therefore, the declining US hegemony and the rise of China has revealed that the global system is drifting towards bipolarity. Our international actors such as Russia, Japan, India, Germany, and others have optimum potential to maintain sustainable multipolarity by balancing the global order without allowing the formation of a bipolar division between US and China, by abstaining from joining or supporting either of them. All these countries have major economic links with the Chinese market, and therefore they know that taking sides in the new Cold War will not be in their economic and other interests. So in this context, both US and China are poised to choose the cyber domain as the primary channel to achieve their objectives, and other ways of confrontation, such as proxy wars, will recede to a secondary place. The reason for this shift are understandable. First, information technology offers the abilities to weaken the adversarial power far more effectively by targeting critical infrastructure such as banking, energy, and defense sectors than proxy wars do. Second, the cyber domain can provide the avenues to operate from unknown sources to do damage and yet avoid military retaliation. Third, the superior technological capabilities of the US may prompt it to sustain its hegemonic ambitions primarily through cyber domain, not only by shaping global norms, but also by incapacitating the adversarial powers militarily as well. So the US military utilized and benefited from the application of high technologies, first in the Gulf War, which inspired other nations to harness their technological abilities. So now coming to possible ways of rapprochement. So positive acceptance of each other's global national issues by US and the Chinese administration is the need of the hour to reduce the tension and promote equitable globalism and multilateralism. Besides, inclusive globalization is necessary to reduce the inequality among states and promote international peace. Some Chinese scholars also believe that tension between both countries could be reduced if China accommodates reciprocal market access to the US companies, abide IPR laws, and promote bilateral business. The strategic mindset change along with mutual accommodation based on the redefinition of their respective national interest may also be critical for rapprochement. So two conflicting ideas, namely BRF China and America's Indo-Pacific strategy, are competing for control in the region. To handle this, both of them should follow a middle path. New strategic arms reduction treaties may be formulated to limit the development of new age weaponry among major global powers, and cooperation will be needed also to enforce by reshaping and strengthening of the United Nations. So to conclude, there is an urgent need for redefining and reshaping the US-China competitive coexistence through avoidance of disparaging competition, and moreover to reassure the world about the prospects for conflicts between them. In fact, peace is an aspiration for all people and development is an eternal theme for humanity. So that's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak Krishna Kumar, for this excellent presentation and
Thank you, sir.
on the US-China interactions. You have brought in all the issues in the domain, and thank you very much for making such a very good presentation. And now I request the organizers, we have completed all the presentation, and over to you, Nirupama.
So now the session is open for discussion. So if any of you have questions,
We can have. Oh, okay. I thought that at 3:30 we'll start the session. So okay, we'll have. How much time we can take?
so maybe 10 minutes.
10
those of you
minutes.
have okay.
Josukutty, can we take 10 minutes? Hello, Josukutty, you are there?
Excuse me.
Yeah. So I request all the participants, if you have any questions or any clarification, comments, but make it very brief. You can use the chat box also, or you can just unmute and ask the question. Over to you, audience. Once again, I thank all the paper presenters for their wonderful presentation. And in fact, we have already mapped the 4 continents: Africa, Europe, Latin America, and North America, US. So I thank all of you for your presentation and keeping the time. And now